Today's episode of Account Management Secrets is all about maximizing growth from your existing customer base. My guest is Rod Cherkas, author of 2 books that are changing how companies approach customer success and account management. In his first book, The Chief Customer Officer Playbook, Rod explains how customer-facing teams can make a bigger impact on revenue and on company strategy. His second book, Reach, introduces a clear framework to drive customer expansion by focusing on 5 key areas: relationships, engagement, actions, customer value, and horizons. In our conversation today, Rod shares why the Chief Customer Officer role matters for driving growth, how account managers can adopt simple processes to work smarter, and specific steps from the Reach framework that help uncover expansion opportunities within your accounts. He also tackles a lot of the challenges that many teams face, like getting support from leadership or getting support from the engagement team. And he shares practical advice for how to show the value of the account management work that your team is doing. So if you want ideas you can start using right away on how to grow your accounts, let's jump in and learn from Rod Cherkas. Hey, Rod, thanks so much for joining us here today on Account Management Secrets. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
You know, LinkedIn tells us that we have 586 connections in common, so I'm amazed that this is the first time we're meeting. It feels like we should have met a long time ago.
I know. I suppose with COVID, maybe haven't been out to I know I hadn't done as many events and getting back on the road with my new book, but I'm glad we have a chance to meet and talk today.
So you've written 2 really cool books. The first one is really about the role of the Chief Customer Officer. This is called the Chief Customer Officer Playbook. So in that book, you really get into the strategies for kind of elevating customer-facing leaders and how we become essential as opposed to, kind of a nice to have within the executive team or real partners there. And that's a great book because it introduces the Chief Customer or the CCO maturity model and like really helpful frameworks there. You've also written a book called Reach, R-E-A-C-H, which is this whole framework for how to grow more revenue from your existing customers. And these are incredibly important topics right now. I mean, I have almost no conversations that don't involve one of those 2. Like, number 1, how do I be more strategic as a leader? Number 2, how do I mine the gold I've got, so to speak, and really get our customers to their full potential. So you've obviously spent a lot of time researching, working with tons of interesting companies and teams on this stuff. And so you are in this position to see a lot of trends and a lot of the bigger picture of what's going on out there in the marketplace. So we're recording this in Q4 of 2024. Obviously, the last few years have been weird and difficult and challenging for a lot of companies, which is causing them to change and to reframe how they think overall about post-sales, account management, customer success, and things like that. And so, Rod, I'd love to just kick off today to understand, what do you see happening out there? What are the top trends that are catching your attention?
Yeah. After a pretty long career as a post-sale executive at companies including RingCentral, Marketo, and most recently Gainsight, I started my consulting business about 3.5 years ago. And in that time, I've had a chance to consult with dozens of fast-growing, primarily technology companies. And a lot of stuff has changed, even in the past couple of years. And one of the trends that I've seen has been this focus at the executive and board level on driving top line revenue growth and improving the profitability. Where money may have been a lot lower cost years ago, companies are really now very focused on how can they bring in more revenue. And what we've also seen is that it's gotten much more expensive and much more challenging to bring in new customers. So your CEOs, your CFOs, your board members are asking, hey, we've been investing in building this great base of customers. What's preventing us from growing faster? And so there has been a lot of effort put in over the last 12 to 18 months, really encouraging companies to see what can we be doing to better identify and prioritize our high growth potential customers. How can we uncover these expansion opportunities? And how do we turn those expansion opportunities into revenue and bookings that will help the company grow faster? It's not about being instead of this new customer acquisition, but these are the things that customer success teams and account managers are increasingly being asked to do. And so I'm looking forward to talking today about some of the resources and challenges that those teams face in driving this important expansion.
Yeah, well, and what you're saying is, for years, everyone's been doing the top of funnel stuff, right? So marketing and sales and hiring and, SDR teams or BDRs and doing all this stuff to generate customers. And it's a perfectly reasonable question to turn around and say, hey, so now what? Like, we acquired the customers, we did all this stuff. And if we really have, for example, if we really have a land and expand strategy, what does the expand part of this look like? And who's responsible for that? And what are we doing about it, right?
Yeah. And how can we do it more consistently and predictably? Not just, hey, growing our customers important this quarter. Everybody call existing customers, see if we can get meetings and sell them more. But on the sales side, they've been doing this for decades. And there's lots and lots of sales methodologies in place to help companies be able to identify, attract, and nurture those new prospects. And there's a lot of resources on sales and marketing enablement that do that. There's also a laundry list of methodologies that are in place, from MEDDIC to SPICed to SPINS to value selling, challenger, all of these sales methodologies that teams can use. And it's important that they use one of them. May not be critical which one they use, but at least there's a consistent process and methodology used. One of the things that I sort of identified about 18 months ago as I was working with my clients was that those customer success and account management teams didn't have a methodology or framework that was purpose-built for expansion and spoke to them in the ways that were important, because they didn't need they didn't need all of the sales skills that the new acquisition sellers were using, but they are having all of these daily interactions with clients. That's basically their day job, is to work with clients to help them understand how they could get more value out of their solution. So I pulled together these learnings, talked to lots of my clients, and then ended up building a methodology called REACH that introduces this repeatable framework for prioritizing your accounts that have high growth potential, how to listen for and uncover these expansion opportunities, and resources to help whether the customer success manager or the account manager responsible for actually closing the deals or bringing it along to a salesperson, how can you move it closer to that expansion? And that's been, really successful with the teams that have been using it. The book has been quite successful in creating opportunities for companies to drive this expansion. So I'm really happy about the way things are going. And I'd love to talk today about, what are some of the challenges that those customer success and account management teams are facing, and in particular, those that are in your growing community. How can they feel like they have important roles for the future?
Yeah, and this is a big deal. And what you're saying is spot on and really kind of mirrors my experience. You talk to the average, SVP of sales or CRO, and you ask something like, what's your sales philosophy or what's your approach? And they've got this, super detailed thing, and they're all incredibly hyper organized and have a process that they follow, and, stuff goes into the CRM, and they're really meticulous and judicious about their process. And then you go to the, VP of account management or VP of CS and say, hey, what's your process? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm still making it up, or I'm still figuring it out. And, there's so little support out there for people. And, like you're saying, so in sales, you're going to have MEDDIC or MEDPIC or SPIN or, whatever the thing in Miller Hyman, et cetera. And account management just doesn't have this kind of thing. They don't have these kind of resources. And that puts such a burden, frankly, on the leader, because they not only have to look after a portfolio, manage a team, hire and fire people, do all that sort of stuff. They then have to create the whole infrastructure, like that whole enablement piece for how we do that well. So before we get into the REACH conversation, because I do want to go through that in detail, what can enablement do to support the account management team? Or how can the account management leader go to enablement and say, hey, I need some help?
Yeah. I think that's going to be an underused resource for a lot of these account management and customer success teams that are increasingly accountable for growing relationships. I spoke just last week at a conference for enablement professionals. It used to be called the Sales Enablement Society, and now is called the Revenue Enablement Society, which reflects the expectation that the enablement teams are not just focused on the sellers, the new acquisition sales, but are responsible for the full revenue stack, including training teams responsible for retention and expansion. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an acknowledgement that the enablement resources are often accountable for it. However, I didn't see that in practice. Right. So I was told by one of the board members that they had about 180 applications to speak at the conference. And the session that I led with a customer success enablement leader was the only one at the whole conference that was focused on the needs of expansion, customer success, account management, which I thought was mind blowing. Like, just totally really don't understand how it is such a big percentage of companies' revenue that doesn't get resources that have that skill set. So I'd encourage folks that are listening to raise their hand, advocate that they get access to resources from their enablement teams, and make sure that they're getting the focus that they need. They also need to demonstrate that if they get this training, that it turns into business outcomes, into the revenue growth that they expect. But I'm confident that there is growth opportunity there that is just waiting to be captured. I have one of my clients that just recently finished their quarter. The time after they used Reach, they saw a 23% increase in their expansion bookings after basically having 5 straight quarters. So I do know and feel very confident that teams that ask for enablement resources, get training, whatever it is, whether it's on Reach or some other process that you're using, can deliver really impactful results.
And so is this a question of is it a question of organizational design? Like, we just don't have enablement teams and account managers working close enough together? Is it a question of incentives, meaning, somehow the enablement teams are tasked just with supporting new business sales? Because it seems like a fairly easy conversation to walk in and say, hey, my team's responsible for 75% of our revenue this year. We could use a little bit of help, and you would get all the resources you need.
Yeah, you would think so. What I've also seen is that it can be challenging to pull away scarce enablement resources from their focus on the sellers and the new acquisition process. A lot of the executives that sort of manage either the enablement teams directly or manage the priorities of that enablement team come out of the sales function. And they know what they need to do to get new hires trained and ramped, and they probably have some expectation that it takes 6.5 months to get a new salesperson fully productive and the training that they need to go through. So they can almost quantify the impact of enabling a new seller in the process, right? We're going to hire somebody in 6 months. They're going to contribute X hundreds of thousands of dollars in booking by the end of the year. So it's very much of a math equation. On the expansion side, it's not clear yet that there is if we invest time in training or hiring people, that you'll get this outcome. Now, I hope we can all change that. I think it's really important that for the customer success teams and account management teams that are accountable for expansion, that they quantify the impact of what they can do, right? How can they accelerate growth from their existing customer base? And then use that to help acquire resources, invest in training, and create predictable growth for the future.
Yeah, and they don't always have the data or the numbers or the facility with kind of putting all this together into a model that would speak so that they can then claim resources. And I know that that's a handicap that a lot of teams are facing. Well, let's shift and talk about the methodology here. So, as you mentioned, sales teams will often have a lot of rigor to their process, right? There's a very specific way that they go through the entire thing between discovery and qualification, negotiation, closing, et cetera. And account management teams or post-sales customer success, often they don't have, these are absent in their work. And so it actually causes more stress because you're making it up as you go and you're being inconsistent in your process and you're kind of hoping that everything you're using duct tape to hold everything together. But in your book, Reach, you talk about relationships, engagement, actions, customer value, and horizons as being the way that we can start to think about this to build a really like a repeatable process into post-sales, particularly for expansion. But obviously it helps with retention. It helps with all the other things that we do as account managers as well. So let's dive into that. Tell us about what these different steps are. Like give us the lowdown on how I can start to implement something like this.
Yeah. It's important for our listeners to understand that what's important to your executive team, your CEO, and your CFO is not just that you can deliver results in a particular quarter, but it's that you can deliver those results on an ongoing basis in a predictable, forecastable way. And so what I've seen is that companies can load a lot of resources, look at their customer base, identify that white space, and create a whole bunch of opportunities in the short term. But then you get to next quarter and you don't have any way to redo that or predict what's going to happen next quarter or the quarter after. And so the concept behind having a framework such as Reach is a way to just systematically look at your customer base and identify what are the companies that have an opportunity to grow with you immediately or in the short term or in the longer term, and then put together a set of sort of intentional activities that you as let's say a customer success team or an account manager can be doing over the following months and quarters to help turn that expansion opportunity into reality.
Awesome. So tell it, let's start. I want to go through this. What does the R stand for? Well, it stands for relationships, but tell us what we mean there.
Yeah. So the idea behind it is I want people, an account manager, customer success manager, to be able to have sort of a structure to be able to answer a question that their manager and executive asks, which is, tell me about the expansion opportunity available at this company. And if I were to ask an account manager, a customer success manager at most companies, their answers would be all over the place, right? I want them to think about answering that question in a rigorous way. So the R stands for relationships, and it relates to the relationship that your customer has with your company. Are they advocates for you? Would they speak highly of your solution to other peers and executives at their company? Are you providing value to them in terms of their own personal career growth? Because if you don't have good relationships with your key stakeholders and decision makers, it's very unlikely that some other business unit or region is going to find your solution valuable, or that those people are going to recommend that they buy more of your solution. The engagement is related to, are they using your existing solution and getting value from it? Because again, if they're not getting existing value from your current solution, are they using it? Are they using the features? Are they able to see the use case impact of it? Then they're unlikely to say, hey, let's buy more. Or what else do you have to offer? Or I want to recommend it to a peer who has a similar business in some other business unit or region.
Right. So the idea there is like unless the initial use case has been satisfied, unless we've sort of checked the box with did we deliver the first value and get them using and whatever the baseline of our product or services is, then there's probably not going to be a lot of expansion opportunity until we get that first part right.
That's right. And each of these has a little bit of a scoring mechanism that you can build into your program to say hey, we don't have a strong relationship. What can we do to make that relationship stronger? They're not engaged. They're not using our solution. How do you get them to use it more? The A stands for actions. And these are things that you can observe that might give you an indication that the customer is interested in expanding their investment. Are they asking for demos? Are they asking about additional features that are available or that might be available in the future? Do they have a renewal that's coming up? Because that's often a time where they're open to negotiation or discussion about how else you can help them. Maybe they have a services engagement or an ongoing sort of managed service that they work with. On the other hand, there might be some things that make that harder, like do they have a lot of open support tickets, or have they had a series of problems? So you as the account manager, customer success manager would be looking and saying, hey, what are some of those situations?
Yeah, so I'd love to explore that one a little bit more. So the actions are, what are the signals that we're getting from the customer that they're in a posture there that they want to potentially like expand or do more with us? And like you're saying, there's some that are going to be positive. We know that they're making certain requests, or they have new ideas, or they're kind of painting a future picture for us. There's obviously then going to be the negative ones, like they're ignoring my calls, they're not showing up to my QBRs, or the support tickets might be escalating or something like that. So is there a standard sort of methodology that we're tracking here to say actions are they're kind of like red, yellow, green, or they're in this column versus that column? Because the reason I'm asking is there's so much noise, there's just such a huge volume of information out there. Sometimes it's hard to see the signal in there.
Right. So I do have a scoring methodology that when I do these retraining workshops with my customers or my clients that we go through. It's also laid out in the book, and things that you can be listening for that make it, these signals that they would be more open to expanding with you versus signals that maybe this isn't the right time. But all of these together give the customer success organization sort of actions that they can take to improve any of these. Because, sometimes a salesperson is going to look and say, is there an immediate sales opportunity? If not, you're dead to me, right? The CS team doesn't have that. They don't have that constraint of, I can't work with this client anymore. In fact, part of their job is to keep working with the client to make them more ready for this expansion. And so I think that's a little bit of the difference between what the sort of the account manager or potentially a sales account executive who's only responsible for expansion versus how the customer success team can support the account management role by saying, hey, in 6 months, they will be much more likely and ready to grow because I've helped reintroduce our solution to a new executive, or the C stands for customer value, right? And can they understand and measure and share information about how this solution is providing value to their organization?
It's a big topic. Customer value is a big topic.
Know that, right? So like, hey, we have to work together to put together. I was just doing a training this morning with a company that makes like incentive solutions for restaurants, and we were talking about how they are building out sort of an ROI model or an ROI calculator to be able to explain to the customers why they could get value from their solution. Now, what was happening there was they were building that ROI calculator for the sales process to demonstrate, hey, here's where you can buy it. I work with my clients to build out the ROI calculator for your existing customers so that they're actually able to see the value that you're getting. And even if you don't have all the data, you can extrapolate it, you can put in assumptions. Your customers will want to correct you. So it's really important that they can see the value, because if you're able to demonstrate how much time it's savings, dollars it's savings, revenue it's generating for them, they'll be much more likely to say, hey, we want more of that, or we want to bring this out into our additional franchises or our additional business units, like we were talking about this morning on this client call.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. And they also look good to their peers, right? So they can show the value to their peers, like, hey, I got these results. It's not about we use this software, we use this product. It's like, I got this result. And they're going to say, well, how did you do that? They're like, well, we used this software solution or this technology product or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Hey, can I get introduced to them? Or you should talk to them too if you want to get those results.
I mean, this is such a big deal conversation around customer value. Greg Danes was on the podcast a few weeks ago. You obviously know Greg. He talks about this a lot. And well, first of all, people are talking about this, but nobody's doing it. Right? Almost no teams out there are doing this in a consistent and organized way that's getting them results. I want them to be going in that direction. You want them to be going in that direction. So hopefully it's going to be happening in 2025. But so far, people aren't ready to adopt this yet. That being said, if you can show your customer the value, even if it's something small, it's a small win, you're still tracking it. You're still able to make them look good. You're still able to show the impact that they're having. This allows them to just get so much more bought in. And then they can start in their mind to say, well, hey, wow, if this company, if I saved $1,000, then what stopped me from saving $100,000? And then the next one, if they made, they saved me 10 hours of time, then they can save me 100 hours. And the idea here is to really clearly point your customer in the right direction, because what everyone forgets in the account management team is we live and breathe our product and service. We think about it all the time. The customer thinks about us 0.5% of the time.
Right.
And they know 0.5% as much as we do about our product and our experiences and our benchmarks and all that stuff. And so going to them, especially with this customer value framework like you have in the book, allows us to transfer some of that expertise to the customer, get them excited, and then they can paint the picture for themselves of oh, here's where we're going. And that opens up massive opportunity for you.
Right. I'm such a big fan of storytelling. You can see that in my books. The Chief Customer Officer Playbook was the rewriting of dozens of stories from successful post-sale leaders who had grown their careers. And I've seen how storytelling can be a really important, effective way of getting your message across internally to your executive team, but also to customers. And so the more that you as an account manager, customer success manager that's driving expansion can be helping your customers to build that story with some data and examples, they can go and talk to their bosses and say, hey, I delivered those results and here's how I did it. And then they can go tell their peers, I delivered those results and here's how I did it. And they're going to think that they're now the expert. And that's good for them. They're going to feel good. They're going to feel confident about recommending you to others because you've been part of that sort of value equation, not just delivering results for the company, but delivering results for them personally. And I know in the community that you're building with AMplify, part of it is not just how can these account managers impact their company results, but how can those account managers grow their career, learn best practices from their peers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's often underappreciated by our post-sale folks that are trying to work on this expansion, that they're kind of saying, hey, you need this solution, go buy it, versus, what value can it provide both to your company and to you personally.
Yeah, and learning together in community and using storytelling as a framework for that. Great. So we're on the fifth one, H. Tell us about H.
So H is about horizons. And so this is a way to help prioritize which of your accounts have growth potential. So I think about it on the horizon, is this customer, do they have other business units that you could expand to? Do they have other regions? Are they doing well financially? That would be an indication that they have more investment to spend. And so this is often not under the control of your account manager or your customer success manager, but it's an important way to help you prioritize. As I was mentioning, I was on a call this morning, and this company sells to fast food franchises. Well, if you're talking to an owner that has 3 stores, Little Caesar stores, your growth potential might be a little bit limited. If you're talking to somebody that owns 80 Jamba Juices, there might be more growth potential, particularly if Jamba Juice is a company that's growing and the financials make sense. So there are some ways in the book and in the workshops that I run with clients that we take a look at, the horizons as a way to say, all right, you've got all of these customers or accounts in your portfolio. whether you're the account manager, whether you're the CSM. Which one of them have this high growth potential? There might be others that have very low growth potential. Maybe they're using your solutions as much as they can in the businesses where it's available. And then you might have others where there is lots of growth potential, but there's certain sort of stoppers that you need to overcome. Maybe you don't have that strong relationship. Maybe they're not seeing the value from your existing solutions. Maybe they're not, using or engaged with your products very well. So there's things you need to do to make that expansion more likely. So, what I see in the teams that use Reach is that they are thinking about and assessing their customers according to these 5 factors, prioritizing them into groups to focus on or not focus on. And then for customers with this high growth potential, how do they listen for and uncover these growth expansion opportunities? And so that's what I do in my training workshops and in the worksheets and the materials I provide, is similar to how your sales team gets trained on one of these methodologies. How do you build this into your daily workflow? We're not turning like account managers and customer success managers into salespeople. They're already having these conversations. How do they just use those conversations in a little bit more deliberate way to be listening for ways to expand value in your different solutions?
So what do I need to have in place to be successful with rolling out Reach? Is this going, is there technology that I need to have in place? Like, do I need to have CRM or a tool like Gainsight or Capta or what have you? Do I need to have certain leadership mindsets, a certain size of team? Like, what are all the prerequisites to get this to work?
Yeah, I would say the most important is a mindset that it's important that, I would say 2 things. Mindset that it's important for your business to find ways to drive more impact on top line revenue growth and expanding within your customers. Mm-hmm. And I also think that there's a mindset of personal and professional growth for the team itself. One of the objections that I hear is that people feel like if they start talking about other solutions, that they're going to come across as too salesy or too pitchy, or they're going to lose their trusted advisor status. And I don't believe that at all. I think that there are very thoughtful ways that you can be talking to your customer about how you can provide more value from the solutions that you offer to be mutually beneficial. People just don't have the skill set. And I think they're a little bit nervous about, taking on some of these commercial responsibilities. But honestly, I feel that this is just going to be an expectation for customer success teams. And it's already an expectation for account management teams that they're contributing to this expansion opportunity. And so I feel like it's just a fundamental skill that teams are going to need to build in the future. And I'm really excited about, the potential to help work with many of the folks in our community to do this on a repeatable basis.
Now, what are the steps and timeline here? So, I'm someone listening to this podcast. First of all, I love the idea that this is for people who care about personal and professional growth, because, the mindset, because that's exactly who all of our AMplify members are. Right? They all care about this stuff. And hopefully a lot of the listeners here as well. But let's say that I'm intrigued, right? I'm like, hey, I want to do this. How long does it take me to bring in this process, assuming I'm starting from scratch? Do you recommend that you start with, is there one part that's most effective to start with? Are we starting with the entire thing all at once? What's that process look like?
Right. Well, I'd encourage your listeners that if you're interested, reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, contact me at rod@hellocco.com, and we can talk about ways to accelerate this process.
Cool. That sounds really neat. I want to come back to something we were talking about and sort of glanced on a minute or two ago, which is the role of customer success and account management right now. There's a lot of discussion today around what is the role of customer success. Frankly, there's a lot of pressure on customer success teams to be performing differently, right? To kind of have different roles. And there's this tension between people who say, well, if I'm in customer success, then I really shouldn't be talking about money because I just want to be the partner and the friend of my customer and the customer's advocate. And so, I really can't talk to them about money or buying stuff. And then account managers typically are revenue oriented people. But, just generally speaking, when I look at this, I think, man, customer success teams that are not like running as fast as they can to get revenue responsibility are crazy and are putting themselves at significant risk in the future because, personally, I always say the closer you can get to revenue, the better. What are you seeing? You talk to a lot of companies out there. How are you seeing this evolve? Are there bigger distinctions between account management and customer success? Are they merging? What's happening?
Yeah, I think that customer success organizations are moving too slow and need to move faster to take on more impact on the top line, whether they're formally responsible for expansion bookings or whether they have like expectations that they're identifying, uncovering, and nurturing those customers. One of the big trends that I've seen is a lot of customer success organizations have gotten moved under a role that's become more prevalent called the Chief Revenue Officer. And these Chief Revenue Officers most often were a sales leader that was previously responsible for the new sales, gets promoted or now has this Chief Revenue Officer title, with, I think, all great intent to have one leader who's responsible for both the new retention and expansion revenue. But they don't have that much experience working with customer success teams, understanding how much work it takes to retain customers and create the expansion opportunities. And so what they're saying is a lot of them are getting these teams and saying, hey, the CSM role has too many responsibilities. They're responsible for retention, expansion, sort of adoption, health, and training. And so we're going to create a renewals team to focus on renewals because then I have one throat to choke on the renewals. I'm going to create an account management team because I'm going to give them a quota and that's all they're going to do is drive expansion. And then it often leaves this customer success team with a little bit of an ambiguous and hard to measure the impact role. And I think this is a tough place for a lot of customer success teams because it's not clear how you're contributing to top line growth or profitability, which is what a lot of executives need to be thinking about right now.
Yeah, every time I come across CS teams that are, they say things like, "Oh, our job is customer happiness," or this sort of thing, and they're not close to revenue, or they're not willing to discuss revenue. They're not willing to go there. I think, oh, this is not a good situation to be in. This is an era of profitability. The era of growth at all costs is behind us. People are thinking differently. Tools like AI are radically reshaping how people think about spending money and building teams. And you cannot simply rely on, I'm a nice person, my customers like me, my job is to make them happy. That ain't gonna cut it, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's a job in the future. I think that the CS leaders and the CCOs need to be able to quantifiably demonstrate the impact that their teams are having on retention, primarily, expansion, secondary, but very important mindset around measurement, predictability, and demonstrating the connection between what your team does and things that the board cares about all the time.
And one of those things is exactly what we've been talking about here today, is bringing a process and a methodology and a framework into your teams so that you're not reinventing the wheel, so that you can be more efficient, so that you can be more predictable about your forecasting and that sort of work, so that you can bring consistency into what you do. And that reach framework that you shared with us, Rod, is exactly the type of thing that teams need to be bringing into their businesses in order to be strategic. And so I just want to say thank you for shining a light on that, and thank you for bringing this type of methodology to these teams on the journey to being more strategic as account managers. So, Rod Cherkas, thanks so much for joining us here today.
I'm happy to join you, and if you're interested, people can please follow me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on email at rod@hellocco.com. And I hope we can all support each other in this important movement and help develop our account managers and customer success leaders to have the impact that our companies need, and to be able to help us all develop in our careers in a way that's fulfilling. So thanks so much for having me, Alex.
Awesome. Thank you.